Friendship as social change, solidarity built on uncommonalities. The objective of this paper is to look at friendship as a possible means of collectivization for social change. It'll look at friendship as a relationship that blurs the distinction between identities to create a bond over pluralistic subjectivity. Building upon the ideas of Foucault, Derrida, and Aristotle, this paper would advocate for friendship as a way of life, which is inherently what the society fears. Furthermore, it'll look at friendship as a means of social change. Friendship in the popular discourse is perceived as an innocent relationship with an overemphasis on its joyous aspect, which can sometimes be a vulgar reduction of the nuances of friendship that two or more people share. Friendship cannot be seen in isolation, as they are equally a product of their time interspersed with the looming systemic forces at play. Friendship always have played an immense role through the ages, through history, in challenging the system in subtle ways or not so subtle ways. The political possibilities within friendship, its power to disrupt and challenge the normal way of life, and giving birth to various social movements or being birthed within social movements, is not necessarily recognized as activism and otherwise may not be documented. The transcendence and boundary blurring act fostered by friendships provides a strong foundation for organizing and collectivizing for social change. In popular discourse, we often talk about friendships based on commonalities, which are founded on overcoming the differences. The everyday transcendence of friendship in different shades which challenge the status quo and the society then become important for intellectual history documentation, not just to capture these narratives but to also capture the multiplicity of relationships and pluralistic subjectivity that these formless friendships invoke. When we talk about fraternization in the citizenship context, it becomes important to document the solidarity that rises through sharing the uncommonalities. Human beings are social beings. We grow and evolve in relation with others. To grow, we need the presence of other people in our lives. Friendship is one relationship that is built on mutual trust, care, love, and bouts of fun and joy intertwined. The role of friend is difficult to define in our lives since friendship as a relationship is the most expansive, most accommodating, and immensely multidimensional. Aristotle has given a very good explanation of friendship in his book Nicomachean Ethics. He argues that uh, for for without friends no one would choose to live, though he had all other goods. Even rich men and those in possession of office and of dominating power are thought to need friends most of all. For what is the use of such prosperity without the opportunity of beneficence, which is exercised chiefly and in the most laudable from towards friends? And in poverty and in other misfortunes, men think friends are the only refuge. It helps the young too to keep from error. It aids older people by ministering to their needs and supplementing that are failing from weakness. Friendship is not a homogeneous concept and hence is not experienced by everyone in the same way. If we go by the Aristotelian categorization of friendship, he argues that there are three kinds of friendships, one based on utility, another on pleasure, and the third one based on goodness, which according to him is the perfect one. The goodness that he talks about is based on the inherent virtue of selflessness and goodwill among two friends for each other as well as themselves, and this friendship is the one that lasts. It's imperative to mention here that even though Aristotle might be describing a close knit relationship that two people share, but when it comes to social change, the friendships take on a different role altogether, where the goodness that he talks about and plays a huge role, even though two people might not share the most intimate personal bond. According to Foucault, institutions make certain relationships and advocate for them, for they reinforce the smooth running of the system. For example, a relationship between a man and a woman is advocated for. In the Indian context, this can be reiterated as a marriage between a man and a woman of the same caste, same religion, and same class. But diversification of relationships cutting across the lines of caste, class, gender, religion as a way of life can yield intense relations not resembling those that are institutionalized. And these rebel friendships, according to Foucault, as a way of life is what the society dreads. The practice of rebel friendships remind us that there are other ways of living and being, and not just the ones approved by the institutions. When friendships are politicized and are seen under the lens of nation states and citizenship, the question of fraternization comes about. According to Derrida, Democracy had seldom represented itself without the possibility of at least that which always resembles, if one is able to nudge the accent of this word, the possibility of fraternization. Fraternity, along with liberty and equality, is mentioned in the Constitution of India, which nowadays is sidelined like any other book, and the reality on the ground is far from it. According to Ambedkar, the designer of the Indian Constitution, fraternity makes democracy a part of lived experience, a way of life, and not merely an idea of political theory. But Ambedkar just looks at fraternity through a caste lens. There needs to be a more intersectional understanding of fraternization, cutting across intersectionality of gender, class, and religion as well. Accommodation, inclusion, and cooperation in friendship as a way of life through a citizenship lens can give rise to fraternization. To look at friendship based on uncommonalities, I have looked at two instances of such friendships and how they played out in helping each other and others with the larger systems and forces. Uh, sorry. To look at the friendships based on uncommonalities, I have looked at two instances of such friendships and how they played out in helping each other and others when the largest forces and systems were against them in principle. These stories and narratives stand for hope, especially in these times when state manufactured polarization is playing out at a large scale. The friendship that I've looked at are around a partition. But when we generally talk of friendship, we generally talk about friendships built on sharing similar experiences, the same background, similar histories. Then, how are these diverse friendships formed when people tend to encounter someone different than them with different histories, different realities, different way of life? One exploration can be that the sharing of joy, whether physical, emotional, psychic, or intellectual, forms a bridge between the sharers, which can be the basis for understanding much of what is not shared and lessens the threat of difference. Another can be the identification of commonalities of oppression, understanding the difference in oppression performed by a common enemy, and possibly coming together to fight this common enemy by being inclusive yet not homogenizing. In other words, respecting the pluralistic subjectivity. Shared estrangements and engagements within movements can give rise to solidarities that weren't possible before and furthers the idea of such movements. We see this type of solidarity playing out in the current nationwide movement against BJP. Placing these ideas of friendship in the current context, we also need to focus on the larger powers at play, namely liberalization and globalization under the umbrella of capitalism. The privatized free market thrives on privatizing the individual and colonizing their hedonistic lives. Capitalism requires sadness and isolation of the individual from the community to maintain its hegemony. It manufactures loneliness just as it manufactures the freedom to consume. Commodification severs all ties created by feeling in community, decomposing them. Capitalism turns the organic into the organic. It fetishizes commodities as substitutes for genuine identities and ties. During these times, when the system is thriving on our individualization, forming such friendships is an act of rebellion itself. It threatens the existence of the system by cutting against what neoliberal economic systems do to colonize our lives. Taking inspiration and hope from such rebel friendships in the past, one can imagine how such friendships will play out in the current context and also in the future. Such diverse friendships cutting across different identity lines, blurring these existences become a new way of relating to others and the community. It points to a post-identitarian model of living, bringing people together in an effort to fight for the larger social good. It helps support autonomous models of organizing driven by affinity and desire rather than institutional affiliation. One such friendship around partition was of Anis Kidwai, Subhadra Joshi, and Mridula Sarabhai. Together, they helped the victims of the communal bloodbath that followed independence. They helped to rehabilitate thousands of refugees who had fled from Pakistan to Delhi and established in Lucknow a home for lost and kidnapped women and children, both Hindu and Muslim. Through these friendships, we see that once these identities are blurred and you work towards a common good, a lot more is possible that wasn't possible before. These rebel friendships that have existed throughout history, occurring in different social movements during different times, need to be documented as intellectual histories of activism. These rebel friendships are an example of fraternity and solidarity which surpasses the notion of apathy cultivated by a system. The question then that I want to pose is, Can such friendships or spaces of dialogue be designed where the identities are blurred to give rise to solidarity through uncommonalities? This question I hope I would be able to answer through the thesis that I've taken for my master's.